I almost flipped it back on then, Dan. Good evening and welcome to another episode of the Edufuturists podcast. It's Thursday again, seems comes round, and for many weeks
you
now.
Sound really exciting. Yeah, it's Thursday again. This comes round fast.
It's like the weekend. Thursday is just a wonderful, wonderful day.
As you can hear, we enjoy doing the podcast.
We do. No, I was trying. I was trying to be somber, and I'm trying to raise the level as we go through, Dan. Before we bring it, I don't want to start too excited like I normally do. Remember last time when I started really excited, and you went, "Have you been taking something, Steve?" So I was just remembering that.
That's because this is how you normally are. So I was really surprised.
I know. I tried to dumb it down. So okay, I'll go back to excited, Steve. I'll go back to away from EO, and I'll be Tigger like normal. I'll try my best. So yeah, welcome everybody. Really excited to have you here. As for the last few weeks, we're struggling to get all three of us together.
I know.
Our busy lives and our busy schedules.
The lowest common denominator here. It's me and Ben.
Yeah.
It's been.
How's it looking for next week, Dan? Don't pretend that you're always here. Like, I've seen the schedule and the planning. You're going to be off more than just as much as everybody else. Let's not get as tiny violins out just yet. But good to see you, mate. You are the linchpin of the Edufuturists, definitely.
I try. The week.
Yeah, how's your week been?
Too fast, Steve. Can't get away.
It is. You're even. Is that a Van Gogh behind you? Do you know you're going up market?
Well, I've got my coat on. I've arrived in. If whoever was listening last week, I spent the weekend in Berwick upon Tweed, up on the Scottish border, and I'm back here again this weekend. Just arrived. Just to do. I'm doing a lot of writing at the minute, so I just need to get away for the weekend to do some writing. But I arrived at the house.
It's Thursday. It's a very long weekend, Dan. When you say what happens is normally you say, "I'm just getting up to Berwick and I've got a long weekend." It's now Monday, Dan. You're still up there and you've just never been home. I won't say what happened when we first came on the call. You were wearing a hat. You had your coat zipped up, and I was like, "Are you cold, Dan? Are you living outside now? What's going on?"
When I arrived, it was 11.5 degrees because I stupidly forgot to.
You're from the north. Literally, that's short and t-shirt weather up in where you live. But yeah, how's a good week? How's the writing going? How's everything going? You've been busy, man.
It's quite intense, yeah. I'm not sure if I can announce it. I think it has gone out in something. So I'm currently writing a book at the moment about artificial intelligence and education. So it's already. You could actually, if you search again, I don't think I'm supposed to say this yet. The publisher's probably going to drop me. But if you search on Amazon, you can already find it for pre-order, which puts a little bit of pressure on because I think it's going to be available the 1st of May, and
exciting times.
It doesn't actually exist yet. So
Dan Fitz, different chip, AI in education. It's an exciting time.
No, it's getting there. It's getting there. Working with a couple of other people are going to jump in and do a chapter each as well, which is cool. A couple of people in the States.
This is awkward. I'd be email yet, mate. I'm just. It must have gone into my spam. I don't know what's going on. So I feel really uncomfortable. Why have I not had an email, Daniel? But good week.
Yeah. It's going fast. How about yourself?
Good. It's been half term. Obviously, the company that I lead is education focused, so it's been a quiet one, but it's been an opportunity to work behind the scenes and put some stuff together. As we were having this conversation, I work from home and then travel for work. I've not really been traveling. I think I've been away once, apart from when I took my wife to Paris, since well before Christmas. So I'm ready to get out. And then next week hits me. I'm in Ireland, then Manchester, then Birmingham, then Manchester, then London. And I think there's somewhere else in between. So I'm literally out for the next 6 weeks. So it's going to be busy. It's nice to be chilled and spend a bit home this week. And like I said, done quite a bit of automation in terms of, for anybody who works with sales, HubSpot, automation sequencing and workflows and all those kind of things, all the fun stuff that you can't often do when you're busy supporting customers. So, but yeah, it's been a good week and back running. I've had that chest infection for 4.5 weeks and the marathon countdown is on 11.5 weeks and I'll be running my next marathon in Leeds. I've been reading the book, Rob Burrows. It's a Rob Burrows marathon and all about that. So it's reminding me of the why and why I'm going to do it. And when I feel a bit terrible and my chest isn't the best, I'm still getting out and doing it now because it's literally, if you know about Rob Burrows and top of his game in terms of rugby league, and now really struggling from the illness he's got. So, but anyway, that's a bit somber. But yeah, it's been a good week and all, and nice to get back out running. Should we get started, Dan?
Yeah, let's do it.
So we'll bring our guest in. We've got Piers Collins from Hundo. How are you doing, Piers? How's everything going?
Yeah, very good. Lovely to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Not a problem. Always a pleasure. And I know we've touched base, and it's something that. So we are missing another person tonight. So we were going to have James Fraser-Morrison on, who's been on the podcast previously, who works with yourself, and then he's trying to get the education going. And we met. James introduced us, and it was something we were like, that sounds fascinating for the podcast. So should we dive into it? So tell us your backstory, Piers, and then we'll dive into Hundo and what it is and why it's needed.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, obviously James has COVID as well, I should say. He wanted to be here, but COVID is still a thing and still quite bad. So he was coughing his way through a meeting today, and I said, it's not good for you to do a podcast. So that's why he's not here. But yeah, my background is that I actually had quite an interesting sort of emergence from education, as I say, in the fact that I went to university and graduated with a degree in ancient history and archaeology from a Russell Group uni, and had my place on a graduate scheme as was promised to me by the system. But I graduated in 2008. So the financial crisis hit 1 month before I got my graduation certificate, and all of the roles, all of the placements that were made were basically pulled that year. So my graduate scheme was rescinded, which meant I sort of ended up just walking out into a world which was completely different from the one I'd been promised going into that university experience. And funny the way things work out, I ended up going into the world of recruitment simply because it was one of the few areas that was hiring at the time. I'm originally from Portsmouth and went back from university to live with my parents and wanted to quickly get out and spread my wings. So recruitment was the fastest way to move out of my parents' house. And then spent about 8-9 years recruiting from sort of graduate to sort of mid-level in the investment banking world, which was a really big eye-opener in terms of how business works, how graduate schemes work, things that I'd never really come across because obviously when I graduated that didn't happen. But ultimately sort of saw that there was huge inequality going on in that process, but also that even with these really sophisticated banks who are making a fortune and have huge budgets for all of these things, it felt like a really old-fashioned process that hadn't really changed. So writing a CV, writing a cover letter, and using that as sort of the data point to work out whether an employee is good for you, especially if they're entry level and have had no experience. I didn't necessarily feel like I was placing the best bankers. I felt like I was just placing the people who knew the most about banking, and that usually meant that their parents were bankers or at least in professional services. So that sort of led me to what I do today. And over those 10 years, built a big enough chip on my shoulder that I wanted to change something. And that's what led us to found Hundo.
Amazing. So what I suppose, give us an introduction to what Hundo is then and how it's solving that problem.
Yeah. So, I mean, without going too technical, I think it's easier to talk about the problem first. So the problem was that I felt there was not a level playing field for all young people to access equitable careers advice. Basically depended far too much on what your parents did, what provisions you have in your education. So be that FE college, at university, at sixth form, or even at school. And then I guess we've all got experience with the random interventions that happen to you between the ages of like 16 and 21 before you leave education that basically set you on this path for your career. And if you don't get the like random inputs right, then you can actually end up doing the wrong thing for quite a long time or never even finding the thing that's right for you. So technology, I am not a tech guy. So my background was recruitment, as I said, like she's like the most manual, numbers game business in the world. It's very easy to understand it. The more placements you make, the more money you make, the more phone calls you make, the more placements you make. It's really that binary. But I knew that technology existed and I thought, is there some way I can use this? So use the technology that's available in the world to try and create this level playing field that allows equitable access for young people, but ultimately also allows better data for future employers. Something that's better and stronger than a CV, which is not a very good data source if you really think about it. So Hundo is a tech platform that has a few innovations, which I guess we'll talk about later. But essentially what it does is provide a live resource for educators, parents, and young people to access the world of work. So understanding what companies do, where they exist in the ecosystem, and how that's relevant to their education, which is the most important thing. Why you're learning this stuff, what does it equal in the real world afterwards? And then from the employer perspective, providing a more data-rich way of assessing your future talent pool, and actually stop being I guess what I call a passive bystander to education, and start actively engaging with your future talent whilst they're still in education, hopefully allowing you to create a better talent pool for your industry and your business going forward.
So it's an interesting one. Going to play devil's advocate, like anything. We've been talking AI before we even came on, and I know, Dan, you're on a Good Morning, and people always say, "Oh well, the system's already is working, and why change it?" So if people are going to university, progressing through education, and applying and getting jobs, and the government currently will tell you that unemployment is at an all-time low, and everything else. If it's currently working, why is there a shift needed? Why do we need to move things forward? And what kind of understanding have you got from business, what works and communication with young people and industry have you done to kind of think, right, there is a market, and it does need not just a nudge, but a seismic shift to what you're trying to produce at Hundo, I guess?
The first question is, how do you define working, right? I think there's systems are systems. They will get something done. It's up to you to define whether it's being successful or not. I'd argue that most businesses would say it's not being successful, because you're seeing skill shortages across the board in most industries, obviously exacerbated by leaving the European Union. And I know that when I was placing graduates into investment banks, 2 in 10 were coming from the UK. 80% of those graduate placements were going outside of the UK. So that's dried up for a lot of employers now, which means that we have to maximize our talent in this country. And that makes it even more important to get this right. There's some real stats that kill me that I've learned on this journey as well. And then one of them is that 80% of work experience in sixth form, so 16 to 18-year-olds, is still sourced by parents and family, which is crazy to me, because that's surely exacerbating all the issues we have with inclusion and diversity in businesses. Because if you're entirely beholden on what your family know or who your family know to find your work experience, you could be the best architect. We could have the best architect at 16 years old living in this country right now, and if their parents or family don't know anybody in that industry, and they never even find out that's something they're good at, think of all that talent we're not using. So that's what I sort of look at now. And then you physically go around and see, and I know you guys have strong connections in colleges and FE and universities. The pace that the world of work has changed, and the pace that new jobs, we're talking about AI, the disruption of tech, that's creating new job types all the time. The average career service, depending on funding and how many people they work there, hasn't got a chance of keeping up with the nuance of those job changes and the speed of growth. And then you can layer on top of that what has happened since COVID. How has work changed? And that's what I see, which is crazy, right? Like, education, because it's slower, cannot keep up, but you're still insisting on getting young people to do work experience in offices, when actually you're in this bizarre world where they have to go in for 5 days a week, but the actual employees of that company are going in for 1 or 2 days a week, because everybody's flexi working now. So I think the key thing is that the change is happening faster and faster, and it's technologically enabled. And how do we make sure that our system that we think may or may not be working keeps up with that pace of change? And for me, that's all about getting the quality of data on both sides of the equation. So educating the educators and young people and parents, the influencers on those young people, about what's going on in that world, and then getting employers to understand more about what young people are doing and how their education is relevant to the future of work.
It's fascinating, and I know you said you're not a tech person, but some of the underpinning technology behind the platform and what you're trying to create is so important. And I think we'll talk about decentralization and the ownership of information as we go through the conversation now. But talk us through how it's built. How is it different to something else, and what you're trying to achieve from using that type of technology?
Yeah, of course. So I always talk about this in terms of, I guess, innovation versus invention. So, as I said, I'm not a tech person in terms of I'm not inventing new tech. But what I can do is look at things that exist, understand them, and see how we can incorporate them in this new platform. So I guess for a long time, I really thought CVs do young people a disservice. From my days in recruitment, even with the investment banks, when you're dealing with, the top 0.5% of graduates in Europe, all of their CVs looked exactly the same, because you're asking for essentially, you have to have these grades to apply for this job. So by the nature of that being a requirement, everybody has those grades, and then they all have no experience. So how do you then start to separate who's right for your business? But it's a very hard thing to replace, because even if you look at LinkedIn, you are still just creating a CV. You're just writing it out in a digital format. There's nothing that's verified about that. So it really came out of two big things. One was the fact that we won an Innovate UK grant. So that's been phenomenal. And I'd recommend that to anybody who's in a startup in a highly innovative space to look at the grants you can get, because it gives you some cash to go and basically risk a big idea. And so with that grant, which we received very early on in actually COVID 2020, we tested the concept of, could we replace the skills profile, so a LinkedIn profile or a CV, with an avatar? The idea being that avatars are something that young people are really comfortable with. They are using them online regularly in Fortnite. And for those who are sort of the believers in Web3, like myself, and the future of the internet, we partnered with a company called Ready Player Me, who create our avatars. And their vision and our vision is those will be cross-platform avatars. So you will be able to take that identity through the internet with you, rather than signing in multiple different profiles as you do today in the current form of the internet. So that's a really interesting development of technology that I thought. And as Steve mentioned, that goes into sort of self-sovereign data ownership and things like that, but we'll come to that later. The second big thing that happened during COVID, which inspired this platform, was the boom in crypto, right? I think that because people had less to do, they're at home a lot, crypto became a big thing. Lots of people made a lot of money. We all know what's happened now. And, I don't think it's that surprising that there was a reckoning. But actually, the underlying technology that supported that was really interesting. And that was namely blockchain. So, as I said, not technical. I looked at blockchain, and in my really basic mind, I thought, well, basically, all it is it's a ledger of verified facts. If I give you a Bitcoin, Dan, it's on the blockchain as that is no longer my Bitcoin. That is your Bitcoin, right? So we thought, could we somehow incorporate that technology as the nearest thing that actually could genuinely replace the CV? Because actually, if you are verifying qualifications through on-chain as you get them in real time, you will essentially be creating a record of someone's skills, and you never have to write it down, because it is basically being recorded in real time and verified as you go. And also, you'll never have to reference it, because it's been referenced at source. So as an employer, you can trust that data. And if you think about it, a LinkedIn profile or a CV is completely untrustworthy data. It has not been verified by anybody. The only verification that you have as an employer is done through referencing. And that entirely depends on how much you can be bothered to reference, right? I don't know how many people go back to GCSEs, right? For example, then no one's checking that, or even beyond that. And then you've got the even, everybody I saw on a CV was captain of a football, rugby, squash, some team. They can't all have been captains of a team. So, there's all sorts of stuff going on in CVs that is not reflective of the real person.
So how does that, Piers, how does that work in terms of, so is the avatar associated with an NFT? Is that how that works?
You're getting there. So yeah, again, forgive my very, very high level view of this. And anybody who's got a tech background listening to this is going to be spitting, because I'm not going to do this justice. But essentially, the avatar sits on the front. Behind that is exactly the same as a crypto wallet, but we call it a skills wallet. Okay. The skills wallet we set up for young people now, but the idea, going back to the self-sovereign point, is you can take your own wallet and use that if you'd like to. In that wallet, anytime that you complete a qualification, you can upload that to us and it'll be verified by a teacher, an exam board, an expert, and an employer that you've done that. Once that's been verified, we will deliver to your wallet what is called a soul-bound NFT. So it is using the NFT technology, which is obviously synonymous with Bored Apes and all the stuff that we saw during lockdowns. But actually, again, it was a really valuable tool for me to think, this is a way of marking someone's achievement and recording it in a verified way. And the soul-bound nature of it is the really important piece, because that means it has no value. There's no value to that NFT outside of it being attached to your specific wallet. So there's no reason no one's going to steal it. You know, you can't have a black market of young people trading their qualifications with each other, which obviously would be a bad thing.
Will they have to? Can this only be read with your wallet, or can they transfer?
No, the end game is that, you know, we fully believe in the Web3 world of, you know, self-sovereign data. You own your own data as you go through the internet, and you decide what you do with that. What we've got with the issue with Web3 is it's not ready yet, right? So you look at trying to set up a crypto wallet, it is terrible. It is a line of code. There is nothing user-friendly about that experience at the moment. So for the average young person we work with, that's not of interest to them. What's of interest to them is, does this create a better way for them to find out what they'd like to do for the future of their...
Yeah, I'm interested in kind of how it works. Like, I'm interested in the technical side. So just in terms of how it works, because we delve in, on this podcast, we delve into like the technical side of blockchain. So it'd be good to... So is it on a specific chain?
Yeah, it's built on Polygon.
Right, okay.
Yeah, we're built on at the moment, yeah.
Nice. So any wallet that can access that chain, as it can be transferred.
So you could export all of your skills into your own wallet as long as it was compatible with Polygon chain.
It's nice and cheap to put onto Polygon at the minute as well, isn't it? So
yeah. And also, you know, a big thing for us was energy efficiency, right? Because that's the big, and we're delivering this whole sector for our in CareerCon next year on net zero and the green space, and it'd be a bit, you know, terrible if we were actually burning up all the energy in the planet just trying to run this platform. So Polygon moving to the proof of stake system and being the most energy efficient chain out there seemed like the obvious choice for us.
Yeah.
And as you say, you know, I totally agree. The tech side is really interesting. And actually, you know, when I talk to people like yourself or investors, they're really interested in it. But I think for the average user, I always liken it to this, right? When I was in uni, Facebook was starting. I was with the guinea pig. I was that first generation who was sent Facebook in through my university email. And, you know, all it was then was just a way of saving your silly photos that you on your big nights out. But I was never questioning whether those photos were JPEGs or PNGs. I didn't care. I didn't care what the tech was behind it. All I cared was it was an amazing way of storing those things, which was actually free for me.
So in terms of what information are you storing on the blockchain there? So is it, so let's say I do a course in, I don't know, 12-week IT course, and what are all the different things I've learned, the objectives, are they going into that?
Obviously, look, we only launched last November, so we're still testing some of these concepts, but there's basically three main concepts that I think you can run through this platform. The first is you can verify and credentialize existing physical education, right? So you're sitting there doing your BTech or your A-level or your apprenticeship or whatever. They're all very similar. They're modular based. They have a big certificate that you get at the end. We can not only credentialize the big certificate you get at the end, we can credentialize every single module. So you can actually start seeing your progress through a module like a computer game, essentially. But also it goes back to that richer data point. So for an employer, let's say you failed your esports BTech, disaster, doesn't look great if you just look at the failure of the esports BTech. But what you might see under the underlying data is this person is one of the top percentile performers in the community module of that BTech. And then you can start picking patterns in that person's skill set.
I think this is where this gets exciting, because many of us have been advocating for a long time now in terms of micro credentials.
Exactly.
And students almost being able to build up their own qualifications and then what that means for lifelong learning. So you can almost like bolt-ons after bolt-ons. And
Exactly.
then
I always look at it like, like in RPG games where you're collecting all of this stuff over time, and ultimately you can start building it together into more powerful items. It's exactly the same as education, right?
Absolutely.
You're collecting these things that over time will become more and more powerful and more useful because you're doing more of them. So that's sort of use case number one, and that's taking.
But I think before you move on, I think the power in that, because the system doesn't change much, as I'm sure you know.
No,
moving away from those big, bulky 2-3 year courses where you get a nice shiny certificate at the end. There's a lot of people invested in that. A lot of people making a lot of money off that, and the big ships aren't going to turn that easily on that. However, I kind of always thought, and the reason I'm so interested in the technical side is because I've explored this a lot and what that would look like, and worked with people to try and like build something quite similar, actually. So, because I find this whole side of things fascinating, and I always got kind of stuck on the whole side of the verifiable credentials being almost like, would it be better to have like an NFT that links to a non-blockchain database? Do you know what I mean? Like almost like a key that opens up a database, or actually store all of the information on the blockchain. But I think, just getting back to the micro-credential thing, I think it's going to take something like this gaining popularity to change the system. Yeah. I don't think it's going to come from the other way around, where the system goes, right, we need micro-credentials now. Is there someone out there who can do it with a nice wallet on blockchain? I think it's actually going to have to be a company like yourselves that goes, you know what, we're getting thousands of new users every week, and this is the way people are wanting to learn. And then that's going to make colleges, universities go, shit, like, we're probably going to have to offer some courses that fit into this model and slowly move over.
And I know we've written articles on it, and I've been in education. I wrote something that was probably horrific. If you've written, thanks for everybody listens and reads my Atomic blog, by the way. But I wrote something around the approach to maths and English, and Dan, I know that you've written some stuff around it, around the focus of the percentage of people that get or seen as a failure when they do their GCSEs. But then when they come to further education, to resit and to go back through, which is a funding requirement for further education, you have to sit maths and English. If you don't have that, if you're seen as a failure and don't have the potential grade, but trying to obtain that information of not what is the grade, what is the underlying principles, what's a strength, what's an area for improvement, what's gone well within that exam or within your learning prior, is a nightmare. And that is held by the awarding bodies, and I know some listen, and I know we partner with some and everything else, but I'm sorry, but they then charge, then say, oh no, we've given you a certificate, and it tells them they're a 4 or a 5 or a 3, and it's like, okay, but not every 3 or a 4 that comes to college, or let's say 3 comes to college, will need to do exactly the same pathway, because we've actually got a year to now get them to try and be seen as a non-failure on paper. But you're telling us they're a 3, but we've got 33s sitting in a room, and around the country, how many 33s are sitting in different classrooms, all then trying to do exactly the same thing based on that number, rather than actually why are they sitting through 30 lessons delivered in a certain way? When it's absolutely bonkers. And I wrote an article and I said, knock down walls, change the system. It's broken because it needs coaching, it needs to be scrutinised. People don't, if they're good at something, why are you getting them to come to a lesson? I'd be annoyed, and my attendance would be shocking anyway, because ultimately I might need to focus for 30 weeks on 10 things that will get me to that point, if that's what we're seeing into, and that's the way that we judge education, rightly or wrongly, right now. But that's the bit that's exciting, because it will be owned centrally, but owned by the student that sits on a platform like this, where as an individual, Dan comes in and says, didn't quite get it, I got my 3, I need to resit my maths alongside my BTEC. And you say, okay, Dan, can you just walk me through, rather than doing a BKSB or a diagnostic, can you just walk me through what your strengths are around maths? Or here's, let me give you access, here's a code, or here's a link to what I'm actually doing, the stuff that I've done prior, and that'll give you all the information. You then give somebody access through Hundo or whoever. That's massively powerful, because it puts it into the hand of the student, rather than saying, oh, let me go to the awarding body and I've got to pay £30 to then see the breakdown of your actual grade. It has been changed for a long time, but it won't be changed until we disrupt it, because the people that hold the power are the ones that are making a lot of money out of that process. Anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. So no, I totally agree. And this micro-credentialization thing is throughout the platform, really. So, that was the first sort of case that we're bringing to the platform, where it's quite simple, right? You're doing these things anyway. We just credentialize them for you, and they're digitally stored on chain for you. That's basically what's happening. The second piece is then, can we look at things that are behaviors or activities that young people do in their own time that should be relevant to employers? And employers are actually coming around to this now and thinking, especially in the tech world, the world has changed so much. There's different things than just captaining the rugby team or captaining the football team, or, I always say the lemonade stand, right? The classic 1950s. I'm an entrepreneur because I set up a lemonade stand in my parents' garden and sold lemonade. There is now young people on Minecraft running servers and monetizing them, before they're 13 years old. You've got young people running Depop stores, upselling clothes, again, when they're still at school. Online, leading clan raids, or, there's lots of behaviors that are happening online that aren't necessarily ever making it to CVs or making it to the light of day to show employers. And we have employers now who actually want to provide an NFT credential for any young person who's running a server in Minecraft, because they think that is an incredible sort of pointer to someone in the future being a very, very good tech developer or product manager. So they are starting as employers to think creatively about, how can I look at signs in a young person's general life of stuff that they're doing in their own time, which gives me a much better understanding of that human being and their drivers and their skills than a set of exam results will ever do. So it allows us to get much more flexible in the way that we start promoting skills and showing young people how they can show their skills. And you're not being siloed through an academic system every single time to try and get these grades. I hope that makes sense.
It does. And you talk about linking into different stuff, and obviously we've explored the platform. We'll put it into the notes for our listeners to go in and see it. So obviously you have the avatar and you'll start to link in credentials, but how will you be able to demonstrate, for example, will you sync in with YouTube and social media content and all those kind of things? Is that the intention, where it should be a whole of many different things? And I know it might not be right now. You're 3 or 4 months into the platform in its infancy, and its maturity, but is that the long-term game? What do you think about that?
Look, content is incredibly expensive, right? So to curate all of our own content, if you look at a business, equivalent is like Masterclass. Masterclass spend all of their money on content creation, and there's no outcomes measured in Masterclass. It's just interesting stuff, right? It's great to learn interesting stuff from interesting people, but you're not getting any certificate from doing a Masterclass. So actually, we want to aggregate content that already exists, as well as make some of our own curated content. And that's all done with employers. So we look at what they've already produced, because a lot of employers already have a lot of stuff internally. They just don't share it. They don't share it with anybody who's younger than the people who are directly applying to them after education. And what we then worked out is, there's this Web3 world that is coming, but the world is not ready for that yet. As we've just talked about, it is not user-friendly enough to be mass adopted. And so we started with our launch in November. We launched with an event called CareerCon. And CareerCon is really a direct reaction to the fact that because of Ofsted and the way that they, and the Gatsby benchmarks, every college and most universities still do a careers fair in their sports hall, which is great, but it's a huge amount of work for every college and every employer to get there. And I don't know how much you can get across about the nuance of jobs and the types of work you can do in a company in the confines of a sports hall and a table, which is usually the setup, right? So CareerCon was a direct reaction to that. And what it is basically it's an on-demand streaming service with 28 hours of content from over 70 employers, predominantly young people. It's all short format video, as well as some immersive spaces. So I will be clear that you can have a headset and go into these immersive spaces. You can wear an Oculus and do it, but you can also just go in on your phone or off a computer. It's really important if we're creating a level playing field. It won't be a level playing field. You've had to spend 300 quid to get an Oculus to get into it. So you can access that anytime. So it's a mixed media sort of Web 2, Web 3 concept, but basically delivering really nicely distilled content from a huge range of employers. What you'll see on the platform now, was our MVP. So it was purely focused on Web 3, the internet, and the future of technology. It's nicely defined. As I said, we had over 70 employers inputting content to that. We had 30,000 students sign up in November across 54 countries, because it's the internet, and we're obviously UK based, but anybody could join. It was really exciting to see that, and actually engaging with those employers through their content streams, because we can build the best credentialing system in the world. And the actual third use case I didn't say about credentialization is we can actually bring employers to become educators. So it can allow employers to actually start putting their own tasks on the platform that augment existing education. And it could be, let's name a business. Siemens could sponsor a course, a very short course that you complete on the platform, but they have their name behind it. There's an NFT that's delivered, and that holds weight in someone's skills wallet. So bringing those employers in is essential to the platform, because it's a chicken and egg, right? The more employers we have, the more young people will be able to engage, because there'll be more jobs and more careers shown on the platform. The more young people we can engage, the bigger sort of tool we have to then engage employers to say, look, there's 100,000 young people here. You need to be talking to these people. So it's that chicken and egg classic two-sided marketplace. So CareerCon allowed us to really flood the content side of the platform quite quickly. And that's being accelerated now. So we're delivering CareerCon 23. It happens in November, so next school year. And we'll be expanding to at least 10, ideally 16 verticals. That includes things like digital fashion. We've got cyber. We have quantum. We've got music, media and entertainment, PR and communications, but also things that are really broad and really relevant to all students. So we've got net zero and green tech for the first time. And we've got employability. And when I say employability, I mean real employability, not just how to write a CV and how to write a cover letter. I want to show young people the nuts and bolts and the dark arts that go on in how you get a job. Because I think the average young person, or average person maybe, thinks that when you send your CV to a job board, someone really nice at the other side is going to review your CV, take deep consideration, and then write you an email saying, come and interview, or no, thank you. I think giving them the context that there is an algorithm that will sort you automatically, then you'll get 7 seconds of a recruiter's time reviewing that. Then it might get passed to the actual client with the job at the end of it. If you arm people with that knowledge, it gives them half a chance to play the game. So we are bringing a lot more content this year, and then sitting behind that content stream will be these credentialized skills that directly correlate to those employers and that content, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Dan, and I know Dan spent a lot of time when in secondary school around careers, careers and everything else. Not about your cut and your anorak, don't worry, and what you've been doing there, but like around engaging. And I think it's that whole thing of building something's absolutely fine. Talking about the avatar and the content and the great technologies is great. You can't really argue with it, because it's needed. I don't think anybody can dispute the fact that it's CVs and personal statements, and that platform is outdated and needs to shift. But I think that engagement with employers, and it's that, like you keep saying, the chicken and egg, but it's also that whole thing of, you want to bring it to the market, but employers are saying, well, who are we talking to? It's bringing both of them together. And how do you find juggling that in terms of which bit is the most important? Are you spending a lot of time with colleges currently and schools and everything else to try and drum up and try and change their mindset around what they're currently doing to offering potentially something free that's better to them to help them save time? But also, how are you managing that as such a small startup, I suppose, is where I'm at.
It's like any startup, right? You only need enough. We have this grand vision that's really exciting, and we're going to change the world, and we're going to impact youth unemployment, and there's use cases for this all over the world. We can help refugees, all of this great stuff. Now that's in the future. All we need to focus on now is proving the concept and proving the model, and actually proving that it is a more engaging way of creating positive outcomes for young people as they're leaving education. So when you think of it like that, we need a small number of highly engaged employers that we're building with now. And we need a small number of highly engaged colleges, universities who are going to really embrace, and a lot of them are, because I think you guys, are in the space as well. I think the right colleges, FE colleges, sixth forms and universities are acutely aware that they're not nailing this. They're not nailing this. And they are very open to ideas. So we're finding actually that I don't need 10 million users, tomorrow. I need good engaged users and good engaged client and good engaged businesses. So there is a chicken and an egg situation, but if you break it down into the fact that I only need 15 or 20 colleges and universities and 15 and 20 businesses to start with, then we can start seeing how they interact. And then, like any good tech company, you scale from that evidence base rather than trying just to go out and do everything all at once when we'll just fall over.
Yeah, no, it's impressive, and I think someone needs to do it really in terms of start to move things along. And I think like we were saying before, that I think it has to be. I think like anything in education, it has to come from the grassroots, and in terms of outside of the system, because I think we've people inside the system for decades have tried to change it and can't. And disruption's coming. We know disruption is coming. We talk about kind of 3 strands of disruption, really. One being blockchain technologies and the decentralization of and ownership that brings. AI, in terms of revolutionizing how we learn and what actually we need to learn and the skills that we need to learn, but also the rise of, and I think this often gets overlooked, the rise of private educational organizations that are online. There's some juggernauts coming down the line in the next, they're here, they're mainly in America, but they're going to be knocking at the door any day now. And once people start realizing that they are offering the skills that are needed, they are allowing a degree of personalization and ownership of education, then it's going to be a matter of time before. I know we talk about it regularly, that taking our own kids out of mainstream education and giving them these other experiences. So I think disruption's coming, and I think education has had an easy few hundred years, really, and it's never really been disrupted. We can look at the internet. The internet hasn't disrupted education.
No, because you're still writing a CV and a cover letter. Even if you look at the job process, it's the same as the 1950s. Apart from posting it, you're putting it on a jobs board.
And the only thing that, and the way that education deals with disruption is it allows certain elements that support the current way of doing things. So, look at, for example, an online portfolio, for example. It's not that much different from a CV, although it demonstrates some of the work. It's very linear. It's very much the same as what we're talking about. Like, I remember going to a conference a couple of years ago, and some guy had created an app where you could insert a video into a CV. It's amazing. It was going to be the next best thing. It's still, people are accepting because it fits into the current way of doing things. And I think we're literally standing over a cliff edge now, where the current way of doing things isn't going to hold. What's coming isn't going to be sufficient. And I do worry, because I think the system's not going to be to cope with it, and they're going to fail. It's going to fail our kids. It's going to fail our young people, our learners, ultimately, because we haven't had the foresight. We haven't spent some time innovating and realizing and listening to the signals that are coming down the line. And I think almost businesses have to. It is almost like a bit of a. When it comes to education, and I suppose you get the same with kind of other public organizations like healthcare as well. Like, it's almost like a dirty word to use the word business in with like a public service. But actually, I think within education, it's going to need private businesses to go, you know what, you guys are doing a shocking job. You haven't been doing it well for a while. We need to step in here and take over because our young people aren't being prepared well enough. And I mean, we go through testimony after testimony of employers who are getting students in with straight A grades and haven't got the basic skills to be able to problem solve in the workplace, to have a conversation in the workplace with somebody else.
Not even that, Dan. I haven't met a college or a university yet that is teaching young people how to use Slack. You know,
Yeah.
750,000 companies in this country are using Slack on a daily basis. Surely, and it's not hard to learn it.
Yeah.
Surely that should be an obvious thing that should be put into curriculum straight away.
Absolutely.
And it's not. That's why I say to educators, it's not big changes. You don't have to like revolutionize with whole new courses. Just think about the way the world works, and tech tools are massive. On average, most companies are using 6 or 7 SaaS tech tools. If you just taught our young people how to use a handful of them, their first week in their first job would be a lot easier. Put it that way.
We still can't even get right how to show kids how to use PowerPoint to do a presentation. Like not even
PowerPoint's still going. I mean, how long's PowerPoint got left?
That's the thing. That's the thing. We haven't even reached that stage to be able to get over that yet. But
that does show that statement and that example there shows how far behind we are. That conversation, that little bit of, oh wow, we don't even know. We haven't even showed them how to use PowerPoint effectively, and then anybody go in. Is PowerPoint still a thing? And I know it's just one example, but like that literally shows. I remember when it first came to teaching, and you're like, let's get it coming in and making noises. Remember all of those kind of things and bouncing in and but that's the thing.
1 years ago, I remember us remember you could make like a line for it to follow, like a path. So an image would come in on a certain path. We used to create like our own cartoons during form time.
But that's the thing where like literally. And now, so we might have done it 20 years ago, but PowerPoint is just a good example of, oh my God, how after 20 years are we still not teaching that right? And how far we still have to come, that the basic bit of a good presentation, never mind the tech tool. So talk about the skills. We talk about the skills often in terms of communication, collaboration, online and putting it into a digital sphere is adding to it and making it sure it's future ready. But those basic principles of, in school, do they honestly spend time saying during you might create a website, but can you work in a team? Can you work to a design? If you might be the best person creative in terms of your own mindset, but if somebody gives you a brief, you have to be creative around their brief. Can you do that? If somebody says, can you come and do a pitch? Can you communicate effectively? Oh, that person don't like talking. I know, but you need to have some form of positive communication to work in majority of industries, to either do a sales pitch, to speak to somebody over the phone and engage with customers or whatever. We do not spend any time focused on it. That's why we're not getting it right, because we don't add any weight to that conversation till we would just go, it's not needed, it's not important. Let's teach you some history, geography. Let's spend longer doing maths. Apparently, that's the big thing. All of these things, you were just, oh my God, it's just bonkers, isn't it? Yeah, I'm sitting here thinking, oh my God, this is just absolutely bonkers. But just
have a really big part to play in that piece. And that's something that we wrestle with all the time, because actually a lot of those things that the employers want, they always say sort of soft skills being the sort of go-to word, which I hate because it's a wrap around for lots of different things. It's a very hard thing to quantify in terms of grades. There's no real course you can point at to prove you have soft skills. So using this technology, there's a potential that we can apply to the soft skills to a credential. So for example, if you went and did work experience or a project for a company, they could actually say, no, you're very good at communicating, or you're very good at teamwork. And I at BT will credentialize that you have the BT teamwork credential. That in itself will hold far more weight than a CV saying I'm a great team player, because every single CV says that. So it allows us a bit more flexibility around how can we actually articulate and record these more nebulous skills that aren't so hard coded into the education system, but are really important for employers. Really important.
It's interesting. I think taking it back to I suppose, the recording on blockchain and maybe going down the line a few years to how this might turn out. Because I still think, like, for example, a certain organization, let's say, I don't know, a college verifies a credential and says, yeah, these are the things they've learned. 5 years time, though, looking at that soulbound, was it soulbound? Was that the right phrase? That soulbound NFT, like, what value is that going to have? Because I suppose then somebody's going to look at it and go, well, it's just some random college from somewhere who claim, because there's a lot of subjectivity around that type of thing as well, isn't there? Like, a lot of teachers going, yeah. they've done that, but you trust in a teacher, you trust in a system, and how robust the system is. So I suppose my question is, how do you plan for that within the recording of the information?
My response to that, Dan, is how do you do it now? You know, at the moment, it's just completely unverified. You can write whatever you like on a CV, and it's down to your referencing as an employer to work out. And, you know, my argument is, you're not, how far down are you referencing? How far back do you go? So yes, there is some trust in place, and
but I think my comeback to that is then, is it not the demonstration of the skill that's most important, rather than the record of, or the heading of the type of learning that you might have had 5 years ago?
I agree. The demonstration of the skill is the most important thing, but when we look at verification, you think of what's the best point of verification. You know, what's the most truthful verification, right? So if it's your mum, probably not great verification, because she's probably
my mum. You're getting personal here, Piers.
Well, you know, Dan, I imagine your mother would say that you're a great communicator, you're a wonderful boy, and you're very brave. You know, all of those things that mums say.
Best person in the world. Is she not right?
Your credentials from your mother would be outstanding. So we're thinking always, what's the most sort of, I guess, valuable credential you can get, or verification you can get. So teachers are all right, because actually it's still better than the state of the art. If you've got, you know, Pearson or an exam board or City and Guilds delivering something, obviously they're great, because they're not going to be, you know, that's in their interest for there not to be fraud in this. And then I think employers are really important, because employers are the ones that can actually add their own weight by their own brand. And this is what I keep coming back to. And it was something I was really struggling with, because it's trying to represent something that happens in real life. And what I'm not articulating very well, but a good example is, if I, in my recruitment days, had a pool of graduates who got into the Goldman Sachs process, say 30 of them. Goldman Sachs, fantastic, you know, the best bank there is to get and go and work for, allegedly. You know, they'd hire maybe 6 of them. But the 24 that got into the process would be more employable, even though they didn't get a job at Goldman, on the basis they got into that process. So what I mean by that is, if you could credentialize that Goldman have said this person is good at this, that makes them more attractive to other employers. And this gives us the best opportunity. That would just be me physically picking up the phone and saying to another bank or another employer, do you want to see all these guys who went to Goldman and didn't get in? If we can actually take that away and say, you've got, you know, this is what Goldman think your skills are, and they've credentialized that for you, then that can be taken to another employer and hold real weight. And that's what I mean by about how we can start articulating these more nebulous skills in a more concrete way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. It's interesting to talk to somebody else who's obviously thought this through and thought about this in detail as well, because it's something I come back to quite regularly, and just trying to work out kind of what's the best way to represent a skill. Because I think we talk a lot about, actually, it's not just the academic skills, it's the soft skills, but how do you quantify some of that? It's very difficult. And I suppose that's why the education system is so obsessed with the grade, because it's easy. It's the easiest thing to do, isn't it? To stick a paper in front of a student and go, write some answers, we'll give you a mark, and there's your grade. But it's the actual real important things are hard to grasp. They're hard to quantify. They're hard even sometimes to demonstrate. So it's how do we let students flourish or be represented or have a voice on it within those areas, I think it's fascinating. And I think there's definitely a shitload of improvement that's going to happen with that, and innovation that's going to happen with that. And you guys seem to be really pushing that.
And I think that's the thing. As we come to the hour, I think it's an interesting thing because there has been a trend, haven't there, Dan, as we've had conversations over the last. Well, we've had conversations over the last 5 years, or you and Ben have, and I joined 4 years ago this week. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody, and the celebration of that and the 4 years of me joining. But we've had conversations in the last 6 months, or even maybe longer, has been around that skill, that focus away from just the academic, the development of all of that, linked into some of the conversation we've been having for such a long period of time in regards to the tech that is driving things forward and can create and support it. Because I think you just said it, Dan. I think it's so important that how do we move away from just being grades? Well, it's a creation of something that is a way to evidence better what is done outside of that. And I think this is the move forward. I think it's great what you're doing. And I think it will really, really help and support those people to be employable, but also to be just have an understanding of what and be able to demonstrate over a long period of time. Because you ask a young person often, what did you do a couple of weeks ago? And so it's a way to document and track over a transcript of learning and skill development over a longer period of time rather than just that certificate of a moment in time once. And I think it adds so much more weight and it's fascinating. And I'm excited to see how it all goes. I think we'll be watching and looking on. Don't mess it up, Piers. Because there's a lot riding on these things to try and shift. And I think there's all of these things coming together to shift education, hopefully forward, as we always talk about it. So it's been fascinating. And I think it's been just an addition to the conversation that we had a couple of weeks ago when we met, to the conversation that we had offline before we came on. But yeah, absolutely wonderful. And I'm excited to see where it goes. So great work, and appreciate you having you on tonight.
Yeah, I really appreciate you guys as well, and thank you for giving me the platform. It's wonderful to be able to talk to people who are such experts in the space as well, because I always need input from experts.
Cheers, Piers.
Thanks, Piers.
1